Good morning, students. So today's our topic is regarding salivary neoplasms. So all of you have studied about the benign lesions of the salivary gland. Now we will discuss about the salivary neoplasms, benign and malignant neoplasms. First, we will go through the anatomy of the salivary glands. There are three major salivary glands. The one is the parotid gland, the submandibular glands, the sublingual glands, and the minor salivary glands, which are present in the lateral margin of the tongue, palate, lips, and the buccal mucosa. So, coming to the parotid gland, as you know, it is the largest of the three major glands and weighs on an average between 14 and 30 gram. And it is composed almost entirely of serous cells. And sometimes sebaceous gland may be also observed in 10 to 42% of the normal parotid glands. So, you know that parotid gland is situated in the parotid region, which is situated below the acoustic meatus between the ramus of the mandible and the sternocleidomastoid muscle. And the deep cervical fascia, it is a investing layer of the deep cervical fascia splits to form a capsule which encloses the parotid gland and is known as parotid capsule. The parotid gland has got a superficial part which is mainly composed 80% of the gland, which lies over the posterior part of the ramus of the mandible. And there is the deep part. It consists of around 20% of the gland volume. It lies behind the mandible and medial pterygoid muscle and in relation to the mastoid and the styloid process. So this is the picture showing three major salivary glands. One is the parotid salivary gland, then submandibular salivary gland, and the sublingual salivary gland. So in the picture you can see salivary gland is present in the parotid. Parotid gland is present in the parotid region, and you can clearly see the parotid duct also. So the duct of the parotid gland is known as Jensen's duct. It is around 2 to 3 millimeter in diameter, 5 centimeter in length, and it begins behind the angle of the mandible, and then it runs over the surface of the masseter muscle. Then it passes through the buccinator muscles and open into the oral mucosa, which is opposite to the crown of upper second molar tooth. Now coming to the structures within the parotid gland, from deep to superficial, it is external carotid artery. So see, deepmost structure within the gland is external carotid artery, then maxillary artery, superficial temporal artery, and posterior auricular artery. Then coming next is retromandibular vein. It is formed by fusion of maxillary and superficial temporary veins. Then most superficial part is facial nerve with its branches. So this is the picture showing structures within the parotid gland, that is between the superficial and deep lobes of the parotid gland. So this is again the same picture showing the structures within the superficial and deep lobes of parotid gland. So 80% of the gland is made by superficial lobe and 20% is by deep lobe. And the contents within the gland are superficial, facial nerve, then coming to retromandibular vein, then external carotid artery. So as you all know, important structure in the parotid gland is the facial nerve. So facial nerve emerges from the styloid-mastoid foramen lying between the external auditory meatus and the mastoid process. Then it passes around the neck of the condyle of the mandible and becomes superficial, and later divides into temporofacial and cervicofacial branches, which in turn divides into many branches. And some of these may be interconnected as known as per as anserinous. So these are the two branches, upper branch and lower branch. Then upper branch divided into temporal branch and zygomatic branch, and lower branch divided into buccal branch, mandibular branch, and cervical branch. Now coming to the second largest gland, that is a submandibular gland. So it weighs approximately 7 to 8 gram, and it is a mixer gland with both serous and mucous cells. So serous units are predominated in submandibular gland, which is accounting for approximately 90% of the acinar cells. So then it is a J-shaped salivary gland situated in the anterior part of the digastric triangle. Then superficial part lies in the submandibular triangle, superficial to the mylohyoid and hyoglossus muscles between the two bellies of digastric muscle. Deep part is in the floor of the mouth and deep to the mylohyoid muscle. So in this picture you can see the medial aspect or the deep part of the submandibular gland as well as the submandibular duct, and you can also see the lingual nerve which is lying very closely to the submandibular duct. So this is the picture showing branches of the facial nerve and the submandibular gland and the duct of the submandibular gland. the duct of the submandibular gland is known as Wharton's duct. It is arising from the deep lobe of the submandibular gland, and then it runs in the floor of the mouth and uh, opens on the summit of the papilla beside the frenulum of the tongue. So the length of the submandibular duct is 5 cm length. Now come to the anatomical relationships of the submandibular glands. Important structure is lingual nerve, which is in close contact with the submandibular duct. Then hypoglossal nerve, anterior facial vein, facial artery, marginal mandibular branch of the facial nerve. Now the third largest major gland is sublingual gland, which is poorly encapsulated, smallest major salivary gland, weighing approximately 2 to 3 gram. It is located in the anterior aspect of the floor of the mouth in relation to mucosa, mylohyoid muscle, body of the mandible, near the mental symphysis. Then gland drains directly into the mucosa or through a duct which drains into the submandibular duct, and the duct is known as Bartholin duct. So these are the sublingual glands which are seen in the floor of the mouth under the tongue. Now coming to the minor salivary glands, there are around 450 minor salivary glands which are distributed in the lips, cheeks, palate and floor of the mouth. Glands also may be present in the oropharynx, larynx, trachea and paranasal sinuses. They contribute to 10% of total salivary volume. So these are the minor salivary glands present in the palate. Now coming to the topic, salivary tumors. First we will classify salivary glands and its tumors. So how can we classify salivary tumors? So one is adenoma, then second is carcinoma, then non-epithelial tumors, lymphomas, secondary tumors, unclassified tumors and tumor-like lesions. So what are the adenomatous lesions present in the salivary gland? So adenoma can be classified into pleomorphic adenoma or monomorphic adenoma. As you all know, pleomorphic adenoma is the most common tumor in the salivary glands, then pleomorphic adenoma. And monomorphic adenoma, also known as adenolymphoma or Warthin's tumor. Now coming to carcinoma, carcinoma is again divided into low-grade tumors, low-grade carcinoma and high-grade carcinoma. So what are the low-grade carcinomas? They are actinic cell carcinoma, adenoid cystic carcinoma and low-grade mucoepidermoid carcinoma. Then high-grade tumors are adenocarcinoma, squamous cell carcinoma, then high-grade mucoepidermoid carcinoma. Then what are the non-epithelial tumors? They are hemangioma, lymphangioma, etc. Then coming to lymphomas, then there is primary lymphoma and secondary lymphoma. So primary lymphomas are non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Then secondary lymphomas are lymphomas in Sjogren syndrome. Then secondary tumor or metastasis can occur in salivary glands. They are local or distant. So usually tumors of the head and neck, especially skin and bronchus, are which are tumors which is metastasis into salivary glands. Then unclassified tumors, then tumor-like lesions. So tumor-like lesions can be again classified into solid lesions and cystic lesions. Then solid lesions are benign lymphoepithelial lesion and adenomatoid hyperplasia. Then cystic lesions are salivary gland cyst. This is again another classification, WHO classification. WHO classifies it into epithelial tumors, non-epithelial tumors, unclassified tumors and allied conditions. So coming to epithelial tumors, A is adenoma. Adenoma can again divided into pleomorphic adenoma or monomorphic adenoma. Then mucoepidermoid tumor, actinic cell tumor, then carcinomas. Carcinomas are adenoid cystic carcinoma, adenocarcinoma, epidermoid carcinoma, undifferentiated carcinoma, and carcinoma in pleomorphic adenoma, or also known as carcinoma X pleomorphic adenoma. Then non-epithelial tumors, unclassified tumors, and allied conditions. Allied conditions are benign lymphoepithelial lesions, cyanosis, and oncocytosis. Now coming to the incidence of the salivary neoplasms. So 80% of the salivary neoplasms are present in the parotid gland, out of which 80% are benign, and 80% of these tumors are pleomorphic adenomas. And 15% of the salivary tumors are present in the submandibular salivary gland, of which 50% are benign, and 90% of these are pleomorphic adenomas. Then 10% of the salivary neoplasms are in the minor salivary glands, which are palate, lips, cheeks, and sublingual glands. Of this, only 10% are benign. So most of the neoplasms occurring in the minor salivary glands are malignant. Only 10% are benign. Now coming to rule of 80, that is 80% of the parotid tumors are benign, 80% of the parotid tumors are pleomorphic adenomas, 80% of the salivary gland pleomorphic adenomas occur in the parotid gland, then 80% of the parotid pleomorphic adenomas occur in the superficial lobe, then 80% of the untreated pleomorphic adenomas remain benign. Now coming to the pleomorphic adenoma itself, it is also known as a mixed salivary tumor. It is the commonest of the salivary gland tumor. It is 80%, as you know, by the rule of 80, it is 80% common and more common in parotid. That is 80% of the cases are present in the parotid gland. It has got mesenchymal, myoepithelial and duct reserve cell origin. Grossly, it contains cartilages, cystic spaces and solid tissues. So this is the picture showing a pleomorphic adenoma. You can note the location of the tumor. It is present below the ear lobule, lifting the ear lobule anteriorly and obliterating the retromandibular space. So coming to the clinical features of a benign parotid tumor. So as you saw in the picture, it raises the ear lobule and it cannot be moved above the zygomatic bone. That is known as curtain sign. It is usually present if it is present in front of the ear. Then only we can test this curtain sign. Then a deviation of the uvula and pharyngeal wall towards the midline in case of deep lobe tumor. So if the deep lobe of the parotid gland is involved, it will deviate the uvula and pharyngeal wall towards the midline. Then facial nerve, masseter, skin, lymph node and bone involvement is seen if there is any occurrence of malignancy. So it usually presents as a single painless, smooth, firm and lobulated mass. It is mobile swelling in front of the parotid gland and a positive curtain sign. As the deep fascia is attached above to the zygomatic bone, it acts as a curtain, so not allowing the parotid swelling to move above that level. So any swelling which is superficial to the deep fascia will move above the zygomatic bone. So you can differentiate it between a parotid swelling and a pre-parotid lymph node. Then obliteration of the retromandibular groove is also common. And sometimes the long-standing pleomorphic adenoma may turn into carcinoma. So what are the clinical features suggesting of a malignancy in a long-standing pleomorphic adenoma? That is, the recent increase in the size of the gland, or then there is associated pain and nodularity over the gland, then involvement of the skin or ulceration, then involvement of the masseter muscle or otherwise fixity of the tumor. Then there is presence of involvement of the neck lymph node. The involvement of the facial nerve can be identified by lower facial nerve palsy, that is difficulty in closing the eyelid, difficulty in blowing and clenching the teeth. Now coming to the investigations of benign parotid swellings. So FNAC is a very important and diagnostic investigation which is usually done in parotid glands. Then you can do a CT scan to know the status of the deep lobe, local extension and spread of the tumor. MRI is a better method than CT because MRI will assess the soft tissues better than CT scan. Then incision biopsy of a parotid tumor is contraindicated as chances of seedling and recurrence are high, and also there is a chance of injuring the facial nerve while doing the biopsy. So always it is better to do FNAC in a parotid gland swelling. So coming to the treatment. So surgery is the first line of treatment. So if only superficial lobe is involved, then superficial parotidectomy is done, wherein parotid superficial to the facial nerve is removed. If both lobes are involved, then total conservative parotidectomy is done by retaining facial nerve. Then first is we have to remove the superficial part of the facial nerve. Then we have to identify the nerves of the facial nerve. Then you have to retract the branches of the facial nerve, and you can do a deep parotidectomy. So in a superficial total parotidectomy, total conservative parotidectomy, we will remove the superficial lobe of the parotid gland. Then by retracting the nerves of the facial nerve, we can remove the deep lobe of the parotid gland also. That is known as total conservative parotidectomy. Now coming to the second common tumor in the parotid gland, that is adenolymphoma or Warthin's tumor otherwise known as papillary cystadenoma lymphomatosum. It is a benign tumor that occurs in the only in parotid gland. It is usually occurring in the lower pole of the parotid. It is said to be due to trapping of jugular lymph sacs in parotid during developmental period. It presents as a slow growing, smooth, soft, cystic and fluctuant swelling in the lower pole, often bilateral and is non-tender. It is more common in males. That is around the ratio of 4:1 between male and female. It is common in older people. The age of onset is 60 years and its incidence is around 10%. So the characteristic feature of Warthin's tumor is it produces a hot spot in technetium 99 per technate scan. It is diagnostic due to high mitochondrial content. Then can diagnose it by doing an FNAC. Adenolymphoma does not turn into malignancy. It is a benign tumor. It will not turn into malignancy unlike pleomorphic adenoma. So treatment of Warthin's tumor is superficial parotidectomy. So this picture shows the common site of adenolymphoma or Warthin's tumor, usually in the lower pole of the parotid gland and more commonly occurring in older individuals and in males. So now coming to the malignant salivary gland tumors, which are again divided into low grade tumors and high grade tumors. So first we will deal with the low grade malignant tumors. Examples are actinic cell carcinoma and adenoid cystic carcinoma and low grade mucoepidermoid carcinoma. Then high grade tumors are usually present as rapidly growing, often painless swellings in and around the parotid gland. The tumor presents as either a discrete mass with infiltration into the overlying skin or a diffuse but hard swelling of the gland with no discrete mass. Presentation with advanced disease is common and cervical lymph node metastasis may be present. Among the primary parotid malignant tumors, mucoepidermoid carcinoma is the most common, which is followed by adenocystic carcinoma. So the commonest tumor is mucoepidermoid tumor. So it is a slowly progressive, often attains a large size and spreads to neck lymph nodes. It contains malignant epidermoid and mucus secreting cells. So there are two types of mucoepidermoid low grade tumor. When the mucus cells are predominated by epidermoid cells, then it is low grade, and it is high grade if the epidermoid cells are mainly. Then facial nerve involvement is late in mucoepidermoid carcinoma of the parotid. So coming to the clinical features of mucoepidermoid carcinoma, usually present as a swelling in the salivary region, either parotid or submandibular gland, then slowly increasing in size, eventually attaining a large size, which is hard, nodular, often with involvement of the skin and lymph nodes. Now come to the adenoid cystic carcinoma. It consists around 10% of the malignant salivary tumors. It is common in submandibular and minor salivary glands. It consists of myoepithelial cells and duct epithelial cells with cribriform or lace-like appearance. It involves facial nerve very early and spreads through the perineural sheath and infiltrate into the perineural tissues over a long distance, that is more proximally. It also invades the periosteum and bone medulla early and spreads extensively. Prognosis of adenoid cystic carcinoma is poor. The treatment is radical parotidectomy and radical radiotherapy is the treatment of choice. Now coming to actinic cell tumor. It is a rare, slow-growing tumor that occurs almost always in parotid and is composed of cells like serous acini. It is more common in women and it occurs in adult and elderly. It can involve the facial nerve or neck lymph nodes. Clinically, it is of variable consistency with soft and cystic areas. It is a low-grade malignant tumor. Now coming to the general features of a malignant salivary tumors. So one is fixation. So usually malignant salivary tumors are fixed to the underlying structures. Then resorption of the adjacent bone. Then pain and anesthesia in the skin and mucosa. Then muscle paralysis. Then skin involvement and nodularity. Then involvement of the jaw and masticatory muscles. Then nerve involvement, commonly facial nerve in parotid and hypoglossal nerve in submandibular salivary gland. Then blood spread, which is commonly occurs to lungs. Then mandibular branch of the fifth cranial nerve may be involved when tumor tracks along the auriculotemporal nerve to the base of the skull, causing severe pain in the distribution area. Then Parotid lymphoma. Parotid lymphoma can occur from the lymph nodes within the gland or from the parotid parenchyma. It can occur in HIV patients or patients with lymphoepithelial disease and in patients with Sjogren syndrome. It is commonly seen in elderly patients. Disease may be confined to the parotid gland or may involve the other nodes in the neck and mediastinum. When it is confined to the parotid, total parotidectomy with radiotherapy and lateral chemotherapy is the treatment of choice. When many other nodes are involved, chemotherapy is the choice of treatment. Now coming to the management of malignant salivary tumors. So before coming to the management as such, we will see the staging of the malignant salivary tumors. So T axis tumor cannot be assessed, and T0 there is no evidence of primary tumor. T1 is tumor less than 2 cm without extraparenchymal spread. T2 is tumor 2 to 4 cm in size. T3 is tumor 4 to 6 cm in size or with extraparenchymal spread, but there is no facial nerve involvement in T3 lesions. T4 lesions are tumor size more than 6 cm or spread to facial nerve, skin, mandible or ear canal, that is known as T4A, or spread to base of the skull, pterygoid plates or encased by the external carotid artery, that is these are T4B lesions. Now come to the end staging. NX is nodes not assessed, N0 regional nodes not involved, N1 single ipsilateral node less than 3 cm, and N2A single ipsilateral node 3 to 6 cm. N2B is multiple ipsilateral nodes less than 6 cm. N2C is bilateral or contralateral nodes less than 6 cm in size. And N3 is single node spread more than 6 cm in size. Coming to M staging, M0 is no blood spread, M1 is blood spreads present. Now coming to specific investigation, FNAC, as you know, that diagnostic investigation is final aspiration cytology. Then CT scan to see the deep lobe of the parotid gland, the involvement of the bone, extension into the base of the skull, relation of the tumor into internal carotid artery or styloid process. Then orthophantomogram, we can assess the involvement of the mandible. It is a panoramic view, X-ray view of the mandible. Then blood grouping and cross matching required. Amount of blood is kept ready before the surgery, and FNAC of the lymph node if it is present. Then MRI shows better soft tissue definition than CT scan. So if we wanted to know about the soft tissue involvement, MRI is better than CT scan. So these are the investigations which are done for the parotid gland. Now coming to the surgery. So usually in malignancies or malignant tumors, radical parotidectomy is done. That is removal of both lobe of the parotid, soft tissues and part of the mandible with facial nerve. Facial nerve is reconstructed using greater auricular nerve or sural nerve. Now there are different types of parotidectomy: superficial parotidectomy, total conservative parotidectomy, radical parotidectomy. As you know, superficial parotidectomy and total conservative parotidectomy are done for benign conditions of the parotid gland. So superficial parotidectomy is the removal of the superficial lobe of the parotid, which is lying superficial to the facial nerve. It is done in case of benign disease of the gland, which is superficial, involving the superficial lobe of the parotid. Then total conservative parotidectomy, it is done in benign diseases of the parotid gland, involving either only deep lobe or both superficial and deep lobes. Here both lobes are removed with preservation of the facial nerve. Initially, superficial parotidectomy is done and facial nerve and its branches are retracted gently and deep lobe is removed. That is total conservative parotidectomy. Then radical parotidectomy. Both lobes of parotid glands are removed along with facial nerve, fat, fascia and muscles. Includes masseter, pterygoids and bassinator and lymph nodes. It is done in case of carcinoma of the parotid, and later facial nerve reconstruction is done using greater auricular nerve. Then suprafacial parotidectomy. Suprafacial parotidectomy is done in lower pole parotid tumors wherein all branches of the facial nerve need not be dissected. And come to the steps in the parotidectomy. The incision is skin incision is lacy edge incision and raising the skin flaps. Then mobilization of the gland. Then identification of the facial nerve trunk. Then dissection of the gland of the facial nerve using bipolar cautery. Then removal of the parotid gland, superficial or both. Then distilled water irrigation to kill spilled tumor cells. Then hemostasis and closure with a suction drain. So in the picture you can see the lacy S incision. So these are the incisions and elevation of the flap. That is the first step in parodontictomy surgery. So the important step in after elevation of the flap is the identification of the facial nerve trunk. So there are many landmarks for identifying facial nerve trunk. So one is the inferior portion of the cartilaginous canal, that is known as Conley's pointer or tragal pointer, and it indicates the position of the facial nerve. The facial nerve usually lies 1 centimeter deep and inferior to the Conley's pointer or tragal pointer. Then the second landmark is upper border of the posterior belly of the digastric muscle. Then third landmark is squamotympanic fissure. And fourth one is the styloid process. The nerve is lying superficial to it. Then if no other methods are present, then mastoid process can be drilled and the nerve can be identified more proximally. So the figure showing landmarks of detecting facial nerve trunk. So you can see the tragal pointer marked as T. So facial nerve is seen 1 centimeter deep and inferior to the tragal pointer. Then you can see the posterior belly of the digastric muscle. Then another marked structure here in the picture is greater auricular nerve. This is the same landmarks as shown in the previous picture, tragal cartilage and posterior belly of digastric muscle. So what are the complications of parodontictomy surgery? One is hemorrhage, then infection or flap necrosis, then fistula, parotoid fistula, then Frey syndrome, then facial nerve injury and facial nerve palsy, then facial numbness and numbness in the ear lobule due to injury to greater auricular nerve, then CLOC. So coming to adjuvant treatment after parodontictomy, what is the adjuvant treatment we required for the malignant tumors of the salivary gland tumor? Then important one is postoperative radiotherapy. It is useful to reduce the chances of relapse. Usually external beam radiotherapy is given. It is given in all carcinomas but more useful in adenoid cystic carcinoma and squamous cell carcinoma. Chemotherapy is also given. Drugs given are here depends on tumor type. Intraarterial chemotherapy is also beneficial. Then in preoperative radiotherapy is given in large tumors to downstage the disease before surgery. If lymph nodes are involved, which is confirmed by FNAC, radical neck dissection is done. It is also done in N0 neck with high grade tumor or T3 T4 lesions. So lymph node dissection is done in a parotid tumor or any other salivary gland tumor if it is lymph nodes are clinically present and the disease is confirmed by FNAC, or if there is no lymph nodes but the grade of the tumor is very high or T3 T4 lesions, then you can do a modified radical neck dissection. Now coming to the indications of radiotherapy in malignant salivary gland tumors. All adenoid cystic carcinoma and adenocarcinomas, all T3 and T4 lesions, then recurrent tumors, then poorly differentiated tumors which are high grade tumors, tumors with lymph node involvement, and as a preoperative radiotherapy for large tumors, then recurrent benign pleomorphic adenomas, then spillage which is occurring during surgery in case of pleomorphic adenoma, then residual tumors, refractory tumor or nerve involvement when clearance margin is inadequate or margin is positive. Now coming to submandibular salivary gland tumor. Now, benign tumors, they are commonly pleomorphic adenomas. They present usually as smooth, firm or hard, bidigitally palpable without involving adjacent muscles or hypoglossal nerve or mandibular bone. And diagnosis by FNAC, orthopantomogram and CT scan. Treatment is by excision of both superficial and deep lobe of the gland. Coming to malignant tumors of the submandibular salivary gland, they are hard, nodular, often fixed to the skin, muscles, hypoglossal nerve and mandible. Diagnosis done by FNAC of the primary tumor and of lymph nodes when involved. Then we can do the CT scan, orthopantomogram. It is usually done to know the involvement of the bone or the soft tissues. Now treatment is by wide excision with removal of the adjacent muscle, soft tissue and mandible. If lymph nodes are involved, block dissection of the leg is done. So these are the pictures showing mandibular swelling, which is malignant tumors of the submandibular gland. So treatment, submandibular gland excision, both superficial and deep lobe of the submandibular gland. So incision is put 2 to 4 centimeter below the lower border of the mandible in order to protect the marginal mandibular branch of the facial nerve. So coming to the steps in the submandibular salivary gland excision, it is usually done in general anesthesia. Position with neck extension with chin to opposite side. Incision 2 to 4 centimeter below and parallel to the margin of the mandible, 5 to 8 centimeter in length. Then mobilization of the gland intracapsular in CL adenitis and extracapsular in tumors with the ligation of the anterior facial vein. Then facial artery ligation is done proximally and distally as artery is in the gland or in the groove posteriorly. Then dissection of the deeper lobar from the mylohyoid muscle. Then identification of the lingual and hypoglossal nerve. Then identification of the submandibular duct and ligation. Then wound closure with a suction tray. Now coming to minor salivary gland tumors. It is 10% of the salivary gland tumors and 10% of the tumors are benign and 90% are malignant. It is more common in palate, lip, cheek, sublingual glands. 10% are benign, commonly pleomorphic adenomas. 90% are malignant, commonly adenoid cystic carcinomas. They present as swelling with an ulcer over the summit. If it is malignant, then extension to the palate, maxilla, pterygoids can occur, often with involvement of the lymph node. Now the investigations of choice are incision biopsy, then CT scan, X-ray of the maxilla, FNAC of the lymph node if it is present. Now treatment of the minor salivary gland tumors are wide excision, often with palatal excision or maxillectomy is done for malignancy. So if it is a benign tumor, we can do a wide excision. If it is a malignant tumor, we can do a wide excision with palatal excision or maxillectomy if it is involved. Then you can reconstruct the defect by dental plates, skin grafting or flap. Lymph node block dissection is done if the neck nodes are involved. Then excision with primary closure is done for benign tumors. Salivary gland tumors are usually benign in an adult. It is very rare in children, but when occurs it is commonly malignant. Clinical and FNAC are diagnostic method. Open biopsy is contraindicated. Cielogram is not useful in salivary tumors. CT scan or MRI is often needed. Nerve should be preserved in benign lesions, and nerve can be sacrificed to achieve clearance in malignancy. So these are the take-home messages from salivary gland neoplasms. Thank you.